Hello, my name is Shanda, and before you judge what I'm about to say, just know this. My family didn't just betray me, they erased me. When my mother died, I thought the worst pain would come from losing her. But it came from the living, my own brother and his wife. They shut me out of decisions, twisted her records, emptied her accounts, and made sure I never saw what she left behind for me. I almost believed I was losing my mind, until her wealthy boss called and whispered, "Come now, and don't tell your brother. You could be in danger." And when I arrived, the person waiting at the door shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. Before we begin, tell me, what time are you listening and where are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments, because what you're about to hear, you won't forget anytime soon. The church was almost empty by the time I finally stepped outside. The scent of lilies still hung in the air, soft but heavy, the way grief settles into a room long after everyone has gone home. I stayed behind to fold the leftover programs, straighten the hymnals, and make sure the last tables were cleared. That was always my place in the family. The one who stayed until the lights went out, the one who handled the small, quiet things no one else bothered with. Earlier, during the service, Brennan moved around as if he were the host of a corporate event, shaking hands, directing people, giving instructions like he'd been preparing for this moment his whole life. He barely looked at me, and when he did, it was only to hand me a task. "Can you check the guest book? Make sure the photo board is straight." Not a word about how I was holding up, not even a nod that this was our mother. Karen didn't offer much either. She had that tight smile she uses when she wants to look supportive but doesn't want to ruin her makeup. She whispered to Brennan more than she spoke to me, glancing at me only when she needed something done. I tried to swallow the irritation, telling myself it didn't matter today. Today was supposed to be about Mom, not about old wounds. When I finally walked to my car, the late afternoon sun was already settling low over San Antonio. Spring here always felt warm, almost comforting. But that day, it felt like the whole city was out of sync with me. Too bright, too normal. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my head was pounding. I set my keys on the counter and leaned against the fridge, just trying to breathe. That's when my phone rang. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Devereaux, my mother's boss, a man she respected, a man who ran a successful corporate office downtown, far from the quiet world she lived in at home. I answered, expecting condolences or some kind of polite follow-up, but his voice was tight, urgent, nothing like the controlled tone I remembered. "Shanda, I found something in your mother's office," he said. "You need to come here, now." I stood up straighter. "Found what? What are you talking about?" A pause, then he lowered his voice. "Listen to me. Don't tell Brennan. Don't tell Karen. Do you understand?" My heart kicked hard. Why would I not tell them? He didn't answer the question. He just repeated the warning, slower this time. "Do not tell them. And get here as soon as you can." Then the line clicked dead. For a moment, I just stared at the phone. I wasn't sure if the floor shifted or if it was just the weight of the last 48 hours catching up with me. I'd spent years trying to ignore the cracks in my family, pretending Brennan's attitude didn't bother me, pretending Karen wasn't dismissive every time I showed concern for Mom. But this was different. I grabbed my purse and keys again. The sky had darkened a bit, the soft edges of sunset brushing the horizon as I pulled out of the driveway. Traffic toward the Riverwalk district was steady but manageable. Cars moved around me, rushing toward dinner plans, errands, normal life. I felt like I was driving through a world that had quietly pushed me to the side. As I made my way down I-10, a memory surfaced. Weeks before Mom passed, she mentioned something odd about Brennan. She didn't say it directly, she never wanted to start conflict, but her voice had a tremor when she said, "Your brother has been making decisions without telling me." I asked what she meant, but she brushed it away, saying she didn't want to worry me. Now that comment wouldn't stop replaying in my mind. By the time I reached downtown, my hands were tight around the steering wheel. The tall glass building where Mom worked rose above the street, gleaming in the last stretch of daylight. It felt too grand, too polished, too far removed from everything we'd lived at home. I parked in visitor parking, took a breath, and headed inside. The lobby was nearly empty. The receptionist desk was dark. Only the quiet hum of the air conditioning filled the space. I pressed the elevator button, feeling my pulse in my throat. When the doors slid open, I stepped inside and watched the numbers climb. Each floor felt heavier than the one before. On the top level, the hallway lights were dimmed. The kind of dim that makes your footsteps sound louder than normal. Devereaux's office suite sat at the far end, its frosted glass door cracked open an inch. I walked closer, my palms warming with nerves. Something felt off, too still, too quiet. Then I saw them, a figure standing right in the doorway, back turned to me, as if they'd been waiting, as if they knew I was coming, not Devereaux, not anyone from the office, someone who absolutely should not have been there at all. I stopped so abruptly my breath caught. Everything inside me pulled tight. Fear, confusion, the instinct to run even though my feet wouldn't move. And in that moment, I realized the danger Devereaux warned me about was real, and it was standing right in front of me. The moment I understood the danger wasn't symbolic at all, something inside me tightened. I didn't step forward right away. I let my breath settle so I wouldn't give away how shaken I felt. And then, slowly, the figure at the doorway turned toward me, as if my arrival was something they had been expecting. It was Rowena. I hadn't seen her since my mother's retirement party 2 years ago. Back then, she'd been bright and lively, the kind of woman who could lift a room without effort. Tonight, she looked washed out. Her hands hovered close to her body, like she wasn't sure whether she should greet me or run for the elevator. "Shanda," she said quietly, "come inside, please." Her tone made my chest feel tight. I stepped through the doorway, and she shut the door gently behind us. The office wasn't fully lit, only a few lamps scattered across the room, giving everything a muted glow. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "But Devereaux asked me to meet you. He didn't want anyone else involved." Something in her face told me she was carrying more than worries. She looked like someone who'd spent too long holding back what she knew. I took a seat, letting my hands rest on my knees. "Rowena, what's going on?" She eased into the chair across from me. Her fingers interlaced, then separated, then twisted again. She took a breath. "I worked with your mom more closely in her final weeks," she said, "closer than anyone realized." I felt my breath pause. My mother had never mentioned that. "She was scared," Rowena continued. "She didn't want to show it at home. But here, her hands were never still. She kept checking drawers, locking cabinets, asking me to reroute her calls." "Scared of what?" I asked. Rowena hesitated, then lifted her eyes. People were coming to see her, asking questions they shouldn't have been asking. Questions about access, about documents, about who had authority over her accounts. I felt the words before I understood them. "Who was asking?" She swallowed. "Your brother, and his wife." The air in my chest locked. I wanted to defend Brennan, but the truth was, I'd lost count of how many times he'd made decisions without including me. How many times he treated me like someone too naive to understand anything serious. Rowena kept talking, her voice steady but careful. "They came here more than once. They said they were helping her sort her affairs. But your mom didn't seem at ease. After they left, she'd sit in her chair for a long time, silent, thinking." I let her words sink in, but before I could respond, something stirred in the back of my mind. A memory I'd pushed aside because it never made sense. A year ago, I walked into Mom's kitchen unannounced. She was on the phone, her voice low but firm. "It's not right, Brennan. She deserves to know. She's done everything for this family." When she saw me, she hung up quickly and gave me a smile that felt too practiced. She told me she'd been talking to a woman from church. I believed her because I wanted to. Now the memory pressed down hard, connecting pieces I didn't want to see. I looked at Rowena. "Tell me everything." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small ring of keys. They jingled lightly as she placed them in my hand. "Your mother told me that if anything ever happened, I needed to make sure these got to the right child." Her voice softened. That's the phrase she used. The words stung more than I expected. The right child. All my life, Brennan had been the one people praised, the achiever, the voice that mattered. I was the helper, the one who stayed quiet. Hearing those words now felt like something shifting under my feet. Rowena leaned closer. She kept items in the third drawer of her desk. She said you would understand what to do. I stared at the keys, feeling the metal warm against my palm. "She trusted you," Rowena said gently. "More than you know." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mother wasn't someone who gave out praise easily. Hearing she'd spoken about me like that made my throat tighten. As I stood, ready to follow Rowena out, she reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was firm, almost desperate. "One more thing," she whispered. "Your mother said someone in your family knew she left something for you. And that's when everything started to escalate." The words moved through me like a slow burn. If someone in my family had been trying to interfere with her decisions, then this wasn't just about paperwork or accounts. It was about control, and maybe much more. I nodded, unsure if I could trust my own voice. Rowena let go of my wrist, and I walked toward the door. When I stepped into the quiet hallway, a thought hit me with sharp clarity. Someone was trying to erase me from my own mother's story. Stepping into the hallway, the truth settled over me in a way that felt heavier than my own footsteps. Someone wanted me cut out. Someone wanted my mother's voice buried with her. As I stood there trying to breathe, the elevator button glowed under my finger. And before the doors even opened, a memory I had shoved down years ago pushed its way back with enough force to make me brace myself against the wall. It didn't creep in. It slammed into me. I closed my eyes, feeling an edge of heat sting the corners. I wasn't sure if it was sorrow or humiliation, but it hit hard. 1 second I was in that dim hallway, and the next I was standing in my mother's kitchen 2 years earlier. I'd walked in unannounced that day. Mom was at the table. Brennan and Karen flanked her on either side. Papers were spread everywhere: medical forms, bank statements, insurance notes. The kind of paperwork families go through when someone's health is becoming a question instead of a promise. They all jumped the moment I stepped inside. "What's all this?" I'd asked, calm, curious, just wanting to be included. Brennan didn't skip a beat. "Nothing you need to worry about. We've got it handled." Mom didn't even lift her eyes to meet mine. She just folded a sheet of paper like she was trying to smooth out guilt. Later that night, walking past the hallway, I heard Karen whisper sharply, "She can't manage this stuff. She gets emotional. It's better if she stays out of it." I remember standing there, my hand on the wall, pretending those words didn't land exactly where they were meant to land. I'd convinced myself speaking up would only turn things into another argument. So I stayed quiet. I let them decide what I could handle. And I didn't realize how much of the story they were writing without me. The elevator doors opened, pulling me back into the present. I exhaled slowly and stepped inside. The ride down felt longer than before. Once I reached the lobby, I walked straight back toward Devereaux's suite. My steps were steady, but my thoughts were anything but. When I pushed the door open, Devereaux appeared from a back room, surprised to see me again. "Shanda?" Did Rowena forget something? No, I said. She mentioned keys, a drawer, something my mother left behind. He nodded and motioned for me to follow him deeper into the suite. The lights were still dim, and the office felt too still for the number of unanswered questions lingering in the air. He stopped beside my mother's old workstation. This is where she kept most of her files. The desk was spotless, not just tidy, staged, the kind of order that makes you nervous because it doesn't look lived in. I crouched, keys in hand, and slid the first one toward the lock. It didn't catch. Tried the second. Nothing. By the third, my pulse was picking up. I shifted my weight and leaned closer. That's when I noticed faint marks around the lock. Fresh. Scratches. Someone had worked at it recently. I drew in a slow breath. This drawer has been forced. Devereaux knelt beside me, examining the edge with narrowed eyes. I didn't touch it, he said quietly. No one was supposed to. The realization pressed down with an uncomfortable clarity. Whoever came before me knew exactly what they wanted, and they didn't care how obvious their break-in was as long as they got it first. I stood up, feeling my legs shake, not from fear, but from anger that had been simmering too long. Did Brennan come by this desk? Devereaux hesitated. The silence between us stretched in a way that made the answer louder than anything he could say. Then he admitted, he was here the day before the funeral. The anger this time didn't simmer. It rose. All those years of being told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional, when in reality they'd been hiding things in plain sight, counting on me not to question anything. I stepped back, trying to steady my breath. I wasn't angry at myself for trusting them. I was angry because I finally realized they had counted on that trust. They used it the way someone uses silence, as a shield for whatever they didn't want seen. Devereaux walked to his desk and returned with a paper in hand. There's something else, he said. I found a copy of the building's access log, card swipes. This one caught my attention. He handed it to me. A single line was circled. A late-night entry. Not during business hours. Not even close. Unauthorized access, he explained. Someone used a guest key card? I looked at the initials beside the timestamp. I didn't need anyone to explain them. I recognized them immediately. He asked, "Do you want to know who it belongs to?" My fingers curled around the page. "Not yet," I whispered, "but I will." Stepping out of the office again, I felt the weight of the log pressed into my palm. It wasn't just evidence, it was confirmation. Someone had gotten here before me, and it wasn't an accident. And for the first time, I knew exactly whose initials were on that page. And I knew this time, silence would only help the person trying to erase me. Walking out of the office, I kept the security log folded tightly in my hand, the edges pressing into my palm. I knew whose initials were printed on that sheet, and for the first time, keeping quiet felt like stepping into a trap someone else had set for me years ago. I crossed the garage level slowly, taking in the rows of parked cars, each space echoing with a low hum from the overhead lights. Just as I reached my car, my phone lit up with a vibration sharp enough to pull me out of my thoughts. The timing was too exact, almost like someone had been waiting for the moment I left Devereaux's office. I unlocked the screen with my thumb, already feeling tension climb up my back. The message from Brennan read, "Did you go somewhere you shouldn't, Shan? We need to talk. Soon." No greeting, no mention of Mom. Not even a question that sounded like a real question. Just pressure. Just a demand dressed up as concern. I stared at the words, my breath slowing into something tight and shallow. Brennan only reached out when he wanted control of a situation. This time, the message felt like a line drawn across the floor. A warning. A reminder of the role he expected me to play. I sat in the driver's seat and shut the door, letting the quiet settle around me. The log was still in my hand, so I unfolded it again, smoothing it over my knee. A column of initials and timestamps ran down the page. Most were familiar employees, routine entries, but the late-night access stood out immediately. KH. Those initials didn't belong to Brennan or Corinne or anyone my mother had ever mentioned. The longer I stared at them, the more certain I felt that whoever this person was, they had no legitimate reason to be anywhere near my mother's belongings. Someone had come into that office with intention, not curiosity. I couldn't go home, not like this. The garage felt too confined, and I needed a place where my thoughts could stretch without being swallowed by the metallic echo of panic. I backed out of the space and drove toward a small cafe my mother used to love. It sat on the corner near the edge of downtown, a quiet place with steady regulars and creaking wooden chairs. A few minutes later, I pulled into the narrow lot and walked inside. The familiar smell of roasted coffee beans and warm pastries filled the air. I ordered a plain black coffee and sat near the window, my back to the wall so I could see the parking area. For a moment, I let myself remember the way Mom used to sit at the same table, folding her napkin into small shapes whenever she was nervous. I remembered waiting with her once for Brennan to show up, watching her check her phone again and again until she gave up and smiled at me like she didn't want me to notice her disappointment. Those memories pressed against me now with a strange heaviness I couldn't shake. I took out the log, the ring of keys Rowena had given me, and my phone. Lined up on the table, they looked like pieces from a story I'd never been allowed to read. One detail at a time, the picture sharpened. Brennan's secret visits, the drawer that didn't match the keys, my mother telling someone I deserved to know the truth, Rowena's fear, those initials that didn't belong. The threads connected whether I wanted them to or not. Someone had been helping Brennan, someone quiet, someone who could slip into restricted areas without raising alarms. A slow kind of courage eased into me as I sat there, not loud, not reckless, just steady. For years, I had accepted the way things were because speaking up felt like inviting more conflict than I could handle. But now I saw what silence had cost me, what it had cost my mother. I pulled my phone closer and typed a message to Devereaux. Please secure all office security footage from the last month. Do not delete anything. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I just hit send and watched the confirmation appear. Brennan didn't get a message. He didn't deserve one. I finished my coffee slowly, letting the warmth settle my nerves. By the time I stood up, the sun had dipped lower, turning the street into long stripes of orange and shadow. I pushed open the cafe door and stepped outside, feeling the cooler air slide against my skin. As I walked toward my car, a figure shifted behind it. I stopped where I was, every sense tightening at once. The keys in my hand dug into my palm as the person stepped into the light and called my name. As I stepped out of the cafe, the late afternoon light stretched long across the pavement. A shadow moved behind my car, deliberate and unhurried, and a faint jolt of fear slid through me. I stopped where the walkway dipped toward the parking lot, the keys biting into my palm. The figure stepped forward, raising one hand slightly as if he didn't want to startle me. "Shanda," he said, his voice low but steady. It wasn't Brennan. It wasn't anyone I recognized. He kept a few feet of space between us, careful, almost respectful. "My name is Layden. I used to deliver paperwork for your mother at the office." The name didn't ring a bell, but the sincerity in his expression made me hold my ground rather than retreat. He looked nervous, like he'd rehearsed this moment, and still wasn't sure he'd chosen the right approach. "I've been trying to find you for days," he continued. "Your mother asked me to bring you something. Something she didn't want anyone else to handle." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small sealed envelope. The edges were worn, creased from being carried around. My breath caught when I saw the handwriting. My mother's loops and slants, careful yet hurried. I took the envelope from him, my fingers trembling at the familiar script. A rush of grief surged up so fast it nearly buckled my knees. "I didn't know who else to trust," Layden said softly. "She told me not to give it to your brother." Those words carried a painful weight. I nodded, unable to speak, and stepped around him toward the sidewalk. I needed space, air, a place to think without the walls closing in. Ladon didn't follow, but watched with concern as I headed across the street toward the small park that stretched along the edge of the cafe's block. The park was quiet, the kind of quiet that happens before evening fully settles. I chose a bench beneath a wide oak tree and sat down, letting the envelope rest across my lap. The sound of distant traffic faded until all I heard was the faint rustle of leaves overhead. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single handwritten note and a folded photocopy. My mother's handwriting filled the page in blue ink, steady but edged with urgency. "Shanda, if you are reading this, I want you to know I trust you. I always have. You will know when it's time to stop being quiet." My throat tightened so sharply I had to pause before unfolding the photocopy. It was a draft revision to her will. Her name signed at the bottom, the date recent enough to send a cold ache through me. She was trying to change her estate, trying to give something directly to me, and someone made sure it never happened. I closed my eyes and let the weight of it hit. The betrayal settled like a stone in my chest. I had always suspected Brennan kept me out of the loop, but I never imagined he'd interfere with Mom's legal decisions. I felt the sting of humiliation, the kind that creeps in when you realize people you love think you can be pushed aside without protest. Ladon sat on the bench across from me, giving me space while still offering support. When I opened my eyes, he spoke quietly. The day she tried to send that revision to her lawyer, someone showed up at the house. They said they would handle the documents for her. She looked upset after they left. My stomach twisted. I didn't ask who it was. I didn't need to. A picture formed in my mind, and it was one I'd been ignoring for too long. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and let the truth sink in. I wanted to believe Brennan meant well. I wanted to believe he wasn't capable of undermining our mother. But good intentions don't involve hiding legal forms or shutting your sister out of every decision that matters. For a moment, I nearly slipped back into old habits, making excuses, shrinking myself to keep the peace, telling myself families get messy. But then my mother's words echoed again. "You will know when it's time to stop being quiet." I wiped my face with both hands, trying to steady my breath. A quiet strength rose in me, not loud or dramatic, just firm. I picked up the envelope again and slipped it into my bag. The blue folder Rowena mentioned flashed in my mind. The pieces were no longer scattered. They were starting to point in one direction. I reached for my phone and typed a message to Devereaux. "I need a private meeting tomorrow morning. Please confirm." He responded almost immediately with a simple yes. That was enough. Then I opened Brennan's earlier message and deleted it without replying. It felt like clearing a window that had been fogged up for years. The sky had shifted into early evening by the time I stood from the bench. As I walked toward the street, my phone vibrated again. I expected it to be Devereaux confirming the time. It wasn't. The message was a photo of me sitting at the cafe earlier. The angle was distant, taken from behind a row of parked cars. Beneath it, one short sentence, "Stop digging." As I stood to leave the park, I felt my phone vibrate again. I expected another message from Devereaux confirming our meeting, but the screen showed something entirely different. A photo of me sitting at the cafe earlier, taken from some hidden distance. Under it, a short line sat like a cold breath on my neck. Stop digging. My hands went numb. For a second, the world around me blurred, but instead of falling apart, something inside me snapped back, almost like a rubber band pulled too far. Fear rose, yes, but it wasn't the same kind that freezes you. It sharpened things. It made the edges clearer. Someone had been watching me. Someone close enough to recognize my car, to anticipate my movements. Someone who didn't want the truth coming out. I didn't respond. I didn't give them anything. I deleted the message, blocked the number, and walked toward my car with my jaw set tight. Blocking it was symbolic as much as practical. I was done letting anyone corner me through silence. The next morning came fast. I hadn't slept more than a few hours. The drive downtown took me past familiar buildings that now felt strange, like the city was holding secrets of its own. When I stepped into Devereaux's polished lobby, the cool air hit me like a reminder to breathe. He came out of his office as soon as he saw me. "You look worn out," he said, his voice gentle but worried. I reached into my bag and handed him the photocopy of the will update, along with my mother's handwritten note. He brought his glasses up and read every line slowly, carefully, as if weighing each word. When he finally looked up, his expression had shifted. "I need to tell you something," he said. 3 weeks before your mother passed, I confronted Brennan about this. The floor seemed to slide under me. "You what?" "He came to the office asking questions about your mother's accounts," he explained. "I asked him directly about the revised paperwork. He said she'd been confused, that she didn't want to make any changes." I stared at him, stunned. My heart tapped faster, harder. He kept talking, his voice steady but troubled. "She didn't seem confused to me," he said. "Not at all. She was scared. She knew someone was interfering." Hearing that felt like someone pressed a thumb into a bruise I'd carried for years. My mother wasn't mistaken. She wasn't losing clarity. She was fighting to make sure the truth didn't die with her. And Brennan had stood in her way. "I want everything," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Every file, every draft, every note you have from the last month." He nodded immediately. "You'll have copies by this afternoon. And Shanda?" He waited until I met his eyes. "Your mother believed you'd figure this out eventually. She said you had a stronger spine than you realized." The words hit deeper than I expected. For so long, I'd been the quiet one, the one who let others take the lead. Hearing that she saw more in me, saw something I never claimed, sent a warmth through the ache. When I stepped out of his office, the receptionist glanced up at me, hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Someone came by yesterday asking if you had an appointment." I turned back. "Who?" "A woman. Blonde, short hair. She said she was family." My pulse stuttered. "Did she leave a name?" "No, but she seemed impatient." That was all I needed. Karen. Of course she'd come here. Of course she'd start poking around the second Brennan felt me getting closer to the truth. I thanked the receptionist and walked toward the garage. Halfway there, my phone rang. Brennan's name flashed across the screen. I ignored it. He called again, and again. On the fourth ring, frustration overcame caution. "What do you want?" I answered. "We need to talk," he said, his tone clipped and demanding. "No," I replied. "You and Karen can stop following me." The silence on the other end told me everything. He didn't expect me to find out. He didn't expect me to push back. I was about to hang up when his voice cut in sharply. Before I could hang up, Brennan said one sentence that confirmed how far he was willing to go to keep me quiet. Before I could disconnect, Brennan's voice cut through the line, low and sharp. "If you keep pushing this, you're going to destroy what's left of this family, and I won't let you do that." I pulled the phone from my ear and stared at the screen for a long beat. That wasn't a warning anymore. It was a threat wrapped in a brother's tone. I felt my pulse hammer against my ribs, but I wasn't going to let him see fear. Not now, not after everything I had uncovered. I decided to meet him, not to make peace, not to smooth anything over. I needed to see exactly how far he had taken this. The drive to his house took me through the northern suburbs, past rows of manicured lawns and mailboxes shaped like little barns. The kind of neighborhood where nothing ever looks out of place, unless you know what's hiding behind the curtains. When I pulled into his driveway, the front door swung open before I could even shut off the engine. He'd been standing there, watching for me. When I walked inside, he was pacing across the hardwood floor, rubbing the back of his neck the way he did whenever he got caught in a lie. His voice tried for patience, but the strain showed. "Why are you digging so hard, Shanda? Let it go." I didn't sit. "What did you do?" He stopped pacing. The silence stretched. Then he exhaled slowly, bracing his hands on the kitchen counter. "I cleaned up Mom's paperwork," he said. "She was getting things mixed up. I just simplified some documents for her." I stared at him. "Simplified," I repeated quietly. "You altered her medical records." He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. "You made her look confused so no one would take her changes seriously," I said. "You stole her voice while she was standing right here." He turned toward me sharply. "I saved us from a mess. You weren't thinking clearly. You never do when emotions are involved." That line hit exactly where he meant it to. Before I could respond, Karen swept into the room holding her phone like it was a prop in some show she was directing. "Well," she said, "since everyone's so tense, let's get through today quickly. We're having a small gathering later. Family, a few close friends. You should come." "No," I said instantly. She smiled, that tight, practiced smile she used whenever she needed to look like the reasonable one. "That's fine. We'll just tell everyone you've been overwhelmed. Losing your mother was hard on you. You're imagining things." My stomach twisted. She didn't wait for me to answer. She turned back into the living room, already rehearsing whatever story she planned to feed them. And by the time people arrived, I could feel the shift in the air, the sideways glances, the cautious tone in hello, the pity couched behind every question. I stood near the doorway, trying to keep my breathing steady, when I heard Karen's voice rise from across the room. "She's been convinced somebody's out to get her," she said loudly. "It's just grief. You know how some people spiral." She looked right at me as she said it, as if daring me to challenge her in front of everyone. A few relatives stepped away, others whispered, and for a moment, humiliation washed over me so deeply I had to grip the back of a chair just to stay upright. Then an older aunt, one who had known my mother since they were teenagers, reached for my hand. Her voice was soft, steady. "Your mother worried about you near the end," she said. "She told me there were things you needed to know. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself." It was only one sentence, but it cut through the noise like a lifeline. I left not long after. My chest felt heavy, as if all the betrayal, all the lies, all the weight of being the outsider in my own family had settled there at once. I walked fast, barely seeing the steps beneath me, and slid into my car with shaky hands. Inside the quiet, the emotion broke loose. Anger, hurt, confusion, all tangled together. "I don't deserve this," I whispered into the steering wheel. "I don't know how to keep fighting." Then Mom's old phone buzzed in my bag. A saved voicemail. I played it. Her voice, tired but intentional, filled the car. "Shanda, if anything happens to me, please look inside the blue folder at Mr. Devereaux's office. I couldn't finish everything, but I trust you. I always have." I covered my mouth as a sob rose. That message felt like a hand reaching back through time, steadying me, guiding me, believing in me when no one else did. When the tears finally slowed, I sat up straighter. The shaking in my hands eased. Something solid settled inside me, a resolve that felt heavier and more certain than anger. "They underestimated the wrong daughter," I whispered. I looked up from the steering wheel and realized someone was standing outside my window, watching me in the dark. I looked up from the steering wheel, and in the dim glow of the street lamp, Brennan stood inches from my window. For a split second, my breath stalled. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't frantic. His expression was something colder, calculated, like he'd already decided how this moment should go. I hit the door lock instinctively. The click echoed in the quiet lot. He lifted both hands as if he were the calm one. "Shanda," he said, voice measured, "just give me the folder. This has gone far enough." I cracked the window an inch, nothing more. The air between us felt thick. "You don't need it," he continued. "You're about to tear this family apart. Mom didn't know what she was doing. I fixed things so everything stayed stable." There it was again, him rewriting the story, framing himself as the protector. "You're not leaving with it," he added. Then he grabbed the handle and jerked hard. The car rocked. I didn't think. I shifted into reverse and hit the gas. The tires screeched across the asphalt, and Brennan stumbled back into the darkness. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, but I stayed focused. I wasn't giving him what he wanted, not anymore. I drove straight to Devereaux's office. By the time I reached the building, it was nearly 11 p.m. The lobby lights were dim, and the city had quieted to late-night hums. I rang the bell until he appeared behind the glass, startled but awake. "Shanda," he said, unlocking the door quickly. "What happened?" Inside, under the soft office lighting, I played him the voicemail my mother left. He listened without saying a word. When it ended, he exhaled slowly and walked to a locked cabinet behind his desk. "I was waiting for you to ask," he murmured. He removed a second blue folder, the kind I had never seen before. The label had my mother's handwriting. He placed it gently on the desk between us. "I didn't open it," he said. "She told me it was only for you." My heart thudded as I lifted the cover. Inside were signed drafts of a new will, detailed notes, and a single line written in her familiar script. "If Brennan interferes, tell Shanda not to be afraid." My throat tightened. She'd known. Every piece of worry she carried, every hesitation. She had known what was happening and still believed I could handle the truth. Then Devereaux handed me one more sheet. She sent this as a backup to someone she trusted. It was an email printout. The recipient name hit me like a jolt. Marlene, my mother's former home health aide, the woman who disappeared from our lives without explanation. "She kept a copy," he said softly, "in case things went wrong." I stepped back, absorbing the weight of it. "I need to talk to her." I called the number on the page. When Marlene answered, her voice wavered. "I wondered when you'd reach out," she said. "Your mother tried to warn you. She begged me to hold on to what she couldn't. Protect herself." She agreed to meet me first thing in the morning. I barely slept. When the sun finally rose, I drove to her small duplex on a quiet suburban street. Marlene stepped outside wearing an expression full of regret and exhaustion. She invited me in, and once we sat down at her kitchen table, she folded her hands tightly, as if bracing herself. "I saw more than I should have," she said. "Your brother pressured her. He brought papers she didn't understand. He told her you were too emotional, that you'd make everything complicated. She cried after he left. Sometimes she cried for hours." Each sentence chipped something inside me. "She asked me to hide the documents," Marlene continued. "She said if anything happened, you'd know what to do." I closed my eyes for a moment. Everything was aligning in a way I didn't want but needed to face. When we stepped outside together so she could lock her door, a truck roared into the driveway. Brennan jumped out before the engine even stopped. "So this is your source?" he snapped. "A caretaker with a grudge?" I moved in front of Marlene. "You forged her papers. You rewrote her history. And you're not going to silence anyone else." He took 2 steps toward me. "You think a few stories will change anything?" He reached for the folder under my arm. I stepped back fast. My voice rang out across the street. "Touch me again, and I'm pressing charges." Neighbors opened their doors. A security camera blinked from a porch. Brennan froze, eyes darting from face to face, calculating what he could get away with. I stood my ground. "Mom trusted me because I'm not afraid of you," I said steadily. "Not anymore." For the first time, his confidence cracked. The mask slipped. He backed away, slowly at first, then with a sudden stiffness that told me he was regrouping. Just before he got into his truck, he leaned close enough for only me to hear. "You have no idea what else I've done." His words lingered long after he drove off. Brennan backed away the night before, but his final words kept echoing long after his truck disappeared into the dark. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard him whisper, "You have no idea what else I've done." It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a confession he couldn't fully say out loud. At sunrise, my phone rang. Devereaux's voice sounded tighter than usual. "Shanda, you need to come in. There's something we didn't know before." I drove straight there. The morning traffic crawled along the highway, but my mind moved faster than anything around me. By the time I stepped into the quiet office, my heart felt like it was keeping time with every clicking light fixture. He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Sit," he said gently, then slid a document across the desk. "This is why I called." It was a bank statement. At first glance, nothing looked unusual. Then I saw the withdrawals, each one processed under my mother's account, but routed into an account labeled in bold, BN Personal Protection Fund. I stared at the name, my brother's initials, not a joint fund, not a shared emergency savings. A personal account. Something inside me sank, then hardened. He hadn't just tampered with her medical paperwork, he had taken her money while she was declining, while I was driving her to appointments and balancing her bills on my lunch breaks. I felt sick. "He did this while she was alive?" Devereaux nodded slowly. "Yes, and it's enough that the state fraud unit has already been alerted." I blinked. "Already? When?" "Last night," he said. After I heard the voicemail and spoke to the witness, it was my legal obligation to report it. For a moment, I just sat there as everything I'd carried, every doubt, every dismissal Brennan ever threw at me, shifted into something sharper. Not revenge, not victory, just clarity. "I need to talk to Corinne," I said. He didn't try to stop me. I drove to Brennan's house in the suburbs. It was mid-morning, the kind of sunny Texas day that made the whole neighborhood shine like nothing bad could ever happen there. But inside, the air was heavy. Karen opened the door slowly. Her shoulders slumped when she saw me. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept either. "You don't have to cover for him anymore," I said quietly. Something in her broke. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "You think I didn't try to stop him? Every time I questioned him, he shut me out. He told me the family owed him. He told me your mother trusted him more than anyone. I believed him because I was scared of what would happen if I didn't." I stared at her, not with hatred, just a painful understanding. Silence still hurt her, and me. She nodded without arguing. "I know." Before I could say more, 2 unmarked cars pulled onto the street. Plainclothes investigators stepped out and walked toward the house. Karen stepped back, automatically, clutching her robe tighter. From down the hall, Brennan appeared. He tried to stand tall, but fear flickered across his face when he saw the badges. One investigator spoke calmly. "Mr. Nelson, we need to speak with you regarding allegations of financial exploitation and manipulation of medical documentation." Brennan's jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous." They repeated the charges: witness statements, paperwork, bank transfers, medical notes. His face reddened. He turned toward me like the weight of everything was somehow my fault. "You think Mom would be proud of this?" he hissed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even shift my stance. "She asked me to find the truth, and that's what I'm doing." For the first time in my life, he had no comeback. The investigators led him toward the house, and I stepped aside. Neighbors stood on porches pretending not to watch. This time, I wasn't the one being whispered about. Later that evening, drained and sore in a way that wasn't physical, I drove home. When I reached my porch, something caught my eye, an envelope taped to my door. My heart seized. It was my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single letter, written in her soft cursive. "My Shanda, my brave girl. I knew the others wouldn't understand your strength, but you were always the one who listened with your heart. Do not let their fear turn into your silence. What you choose to speak will heal generations." I pressed the letter to my chest. It felt like she was reaching forward in time, holding me steady, not congratulating me, not choosing sides, just affirming the truth she trusted me to carry. I sat on my porch as the last of the daylight thinned across the street. I thought of her, the way she hummed while folding towels, the way she squeezed my hand when she was worried, the way she always paused before giving advice because she wanted to choose the right words. "I kept my promise," I whispered. A soft breeze brushed past me, warm and gentle, and for the first time since she died, I didn't crumble when I thought of her. I didn't feel hollow. I felt guided. And for the first time since losing her, her presence felt less like grief and more like strength rising quietly inside me, showing me exactly how to move forward.